Before you scroll past this, stop. Just for a moment, stop. Not because something bad is happening. Not because you need to panic or brace yourself for something painful. Stop because something is moving toward you right now. And if you keep rushing, keep scrolling, keep filling every quiet second with noise, you're going to miss the exact moment it arrives. There is something you were never supposed to find out. Two specific people in your life made sure of that. They sat with this information, they weighed it, they looked at each other, and they decided together that you would be better off not knowing. Or maybe, if we're being completely honest here, they would be better off with you not knowing. And for a while, it worked. The secret stayed buried. The story they told you held together. You went about your life believing what you had been shown, never realizing that what you had been shown was a carefully edited version of reality. But something is different now. Something has shifted in the atmosphere around all of this. The ground beneath that secret is no longer solid. The people who built the wall around this information are starting to feel the cracks spreading under their feet. And the truth that belongs to you, that was always yours, is making its way through. This is what we're going to talk about today. And I need you to stay with me all the way through. Because this doesn't just end at the betrayal. It doesn't end at the revelation. It ends somewhere completely different. Somewhere you didn't expect. Somewhere that is actually the beginning of the life you were always supposed to have. Are you ready? Because here we go. Movement 1. The private room. Picture a conversation that happened without you. You weren't there. You weren't invited. In fact, the entire point of this conversation was that you would never know it happened. Maybe it took place in someone's kitchen, the two of them leaning across a table with their voices lowered, even though the house was empty. Maybe it happened in a car parked outside somewhere. Engine off, phones turned face down, the way people position themselves when they're about to say something they need to erase the moment it's over. Maybe it was a text thread that got deleted afterward, or a phone call taken in a back room while someone made an excuse to step away from the rest of the group. The location doesn't matter as much as what happened in it. These two people you know, two people who exist in your actual life, not strangers, not distant acquaintances, but people who have sat across from you and eaten with you and asked you how you were doing. These two people arrived at a decision together about you. Here is what I want you to understand about that. When two people make a decision together about a third person who is not in the room, it is never casual. It is never accidental. You don't stumble into a mutual secret the way you stumble into a mutual friend. A shared secret requires a moment of explicit agreement. It requires someone to say we should keep this between us and the other person to say yes. That is a transaction. That is a contract. And what makes that contract significant is the question underneath it. What was so important, so consequential, so directly connected to your life that these two people felt it necessary to form a pact around keeping it from you? Whatever it was, and we'll get to what it was, because the information itself comes in different forms for different people reading this. Whatever it was, it had power. Real power. The kind of power that changes decisions and redirects futures and closes one door so that another door stays open for someone else. They knew that. That's exactly why they locked it down. Because if you knew what they knew, you would have made different choices. You would have said yes to something you said no to. You would have said no to something you've been pouring yourself into. You would have turned towards something that you turned away from, or turned away from something you've been walking straight toward. And those different choices, those pivots and redirections, would have changed the landscape of your life in ways that did not benefit them. Maybe it would have moved you further from them. Maybe it would have made you less dependent on them. Maybe it would have simply made you see them differently. And that alone was enough to make the secret worth keeping. So, they kept it. They shook on it, whether literally or not, and they kept it. And here you are, you reading this, sensing, for reasons you can't fully articulate, that something in your immediate environment has not been completely honest with you. That feeling is not paranoia. That feeling is not overthinking. That feeling is intelligence. Your nervous system has been quietly collecting evidence for longer than you realize, and what you're experiencing right now as a vague unease or a persistent low-level discomfort is actually your internal system telling you the data does not add up. Something is missing. Something was taken. It was. But it's coming back. Movement 2. What they actually said about you. Let's talk about the specific shape this secret takes, because it comes in different forms, and I want you to recognize yours when I name it. For some of you, this is about someone who is trying to reach you. A person, someone real, someone who exists and has a face and a life and genuine feelings was trying to get to you. Not in a passing, casual way, in a deliberate, determined way. This person had something to say to you, something that mattered, something they'd been sitting with, working up the nerve to say, building the courage to deliver. And when they finally moved, when they finally took the step toward you, they had to pass through these two people first. Maybe literally they had to go through someone who knew both of you. Maybe structurally, they reached out in a space where these two people controlled what you saw and what you didn't. And these two people made a choice. They intercepted that reaching. They stood between you and that person, and they closed the gap before it could become a connection. And the person who was reaching for you walked away thinking you didn't want them, thinking the silence was your answer, thinking you had looked at what they were offering and turned away. They didn't know someone had answered for you. They didn't know the door was closed before you ever knew it was knocked on. For some of you reading this, the feeling you've been carrying, this nameless sense of missing something, of having lost something you can't quite identify, of looking around at your life and sensing that a chapter was somehow skipped, that feeling has a source. And its source is this. Someone tried to find their way to you, and they were redirected away from you by people who had no right to make that call. For others, this is about something financial, something that was supposed to come to you. An inheritance, a payout, an opportunity, an amount of money that belonged to you by right or by someone's specific intention. And these two people knew about it. They were positioned to make sure it reached you. Instead, they made sure it didn't. And then they positioned themselves in their relationship with you as people who were just getting by, acting stretched, acting limited, performing a kind of financial modesty that was partly real and partly calculated, because the last thing they needed was for you to look too closely at their circumstances and start asking questions whose answers led back to them. The money isn't even the most painful part. For those of you this resonates with, the most painful part is the performance. The watching them act like life was tight while you made decisions, real, significant, life-shaping decisions, based on a financial picture that had been deliberately distorted. How many times did you hold back? How many times did you settle for less because you thought less was what was available? How many times did you not ask for help because you thought there was nothing to offer, when there was actually something that belonged to you, being quietly managed in the background? For others still, this is about something someone said about you, about your character, your intentions, your worth. Words were spoken about you in private that you were never meant to hear. Characterizations, judgments, the way these two people talked about you when they thought no one was listening. And I don't just mean complaints or venting. I mean a sustained, deliberate narrative about who you are that they've been quietly circulating, using to position themselves, using to explain their choices at your expense. They've been telling a story about you. And that story, whether it was told to a person trying to reach you or to a group of people who influence your world, has been shaping how others see you from a distance, from behind a wall you didn't even know existed. And in every single one of these scenarios, the same thing is true. The moment you find out what was actually said, what was actually done, what was actually withheld, the story they've been telling doesn't just become false. It becomes transparent. You will be able to look at it and see every seam, every stitch, every place where it doesn't hold. Because you will finally be seeing it from the outside, instead of living inside it. That moment is coming, sooner than they think. Movement 3. the weight you didn't know you were carrying. Here is something true about being kept in the dark by people you trust. Your body knows before your mind does. Your mind is generous. Your mind extends benefit of the doubt, fills in charitable explanations, decides that the weird moment was a coincidence, and the unusual reaction was just stress, and the deflection was just distraction. Your mind is trying to protect the version of these people you have chosen to believe in, because dismantling that belief has costs, and your mind is not willing to pay those costs without more evidence. But your body has been keeping receipts the entire time. There were specific moments. I want you to go back to them now, just briefly, just enough to recognize what they actually were. There was a moment, maybe more than one, where you asked a direct question and something in the air of that conversation changed before the answer came. A half-second pause, a slight adjustment in posture, eyes that moved away from yours at the wrong time. And the answer came back clean and smooth, and you accepted it. But something in your chest didn't. Something in your chest held very still the way a body holds still when it's in the presence of something it knows is not safe. There was probably a moment where you almost said out loud, "Something feels off," where you got close enough to the edge of naming it that you could feel the shape of what you were about to say. And then something stopped you. Maybe they looked at you at just the right moment. Maybe you told yourself you were imagining things. Maybe someone made a joke, and the energy shifted, and the moment passed, and you let it go. But it didn't go anywhere. You just stopped looking directly at it. That discomfort you've been carrying, the background hum of something not quite right that you've been living with so long you've almost normalized it, is not anxiety. It's not overthinking. It's not some general unease about life that has nothing to do with anything specific. It is information. Specific, targeted, accurate information that your system has been generating every time you've been in close proximity to this secret or to the people keeping it. Your intuition has been writing you notes this entire time. And now, finally, you are about to understand what they say. Think about the moments they changed the subject. Think about the times you mentioned a name, or referenced a specific event, or got unexpectedly close to the edge of this thing without knowing it, and watch, in your memory, what they did. How quickly the subject shifted, how smoothly they redirected, how practiced it felt. Because it was practiced. They discussed how to handle exactly that question. They'd run the scenario with each other. What do we say if they ask about this? What if they bring up that? What if they get close? And they had answers ready. Coordinated answers. Answers that two people had quietly aligned on, so that if you ever asked one and then the other, you would get the same story back. That coordination, that is not the behavior of people who are simply protecting you. That is the behavior of people who are protecting something, and what they are protecting it from is you. Movement 4. The third voice. Here's something they didn't account for. There is someone else who knows. Not a conspirator. Not someone who agreed to the pact or helped maintain it. Someone who simply exists in proximity to this secret. Maybe a mutual friend. Maybe a family member. Maybe someone who was present for a conversation they weren't supposed to hear, or who put pieces together over time the way thoughtful people do. And this person has been sitting with the discomfort of knowing something you don't for longer than is comfortable. Because here is the thing about secrets. The people who willingly keep them carry them lightly. The people who keep them against their better judgment carry them like stones. And this third person, this person who is not invested in the lie the way the original two are, has been feeling the weight of this for a while now. They've had quiet moments of wondering whether they should say something, whether it's their place, whether telling you would help or just cause pain, whether the two people deserve the exposure or whether protecting them is still the right call. But something has changed in the calculation recently. Something has shifted in the way they see this situation, or in the consequences they're watching unfold because of it, or simply in their own sense of what they can and cannot continue to hold in silence. And the scale has tipped. The discomfort of staying quiet has finally outweighed the discomfort of speaking. You may already sense this person. You may have had a recent interaction with someone that felt slightly weighted, where the energy between you was a fraction more careful than usual, where they said something small that landed oddly, where they looked at you just a beat too long before looking away. That wasn't accidental. That was someone who almost said something. Someone who is getting very close to the moment where they do. Or it might not come from a person at all. It might come from evidence, from something you see or read or hear that doesn't fit the version of events you were given. A timestamp that doesn't match. A comment that contradicts the story. A connection between two things that you'd never placed side by side before, because you didn't know they needed to be compared. The truth, when it breaks, often doesn't arrive in one dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it arrives in a small thing, a thing so small that you almost scroll past it. And then something in your gut says, wait, go back, look at that again. And you do, and everything starts to unravel from there. Pay attention to those small things. Right now, in this period of life, pay close attention to what catches your eye and what makes you pause and what your gut responds to before your mind can explain why. The third voice doesn't always sound like a voice. Sometimes it sounds like a coincidence. But there are no coincidences in the architecture of truth finding its way home. Movement 5. Why the secret is breaking now. Secrets have a lifespan. I know it doesn't always feel that way. Some secrets seem to survive for decades, for lifetimes, carried to graves and never extracted. But those are the exceptions. And they're exceptional because of very specific conditions. Conditions of isolation, of complete control over information flow, of perfect alignment between everyone in the knowing. Those conditions are rare. And whatever conditions existed when this particular secret was sealed are no longer fully in place. Something has changed. Maybe it's time. Time does a very specific thing to secrets. It makes them heavier to hold without making the people holding them stronger. The energy required to maintain a lie, to remember what story was told to whom, to monitor your behavior in proximity to the person being deceived. That energy compounds. The first month is easy. The first year is manageable. But over time, the effort of not slipping, the effort of making sure the story never cracks, wears people down. And people who are worn down make mistakes. They let a detail fall out of alignment. They forget which version they told. They lower their guard because enough time has passed that it feels safe to relax. And it's exactly at that moment, the moment of relaxation, that something escapes. Maybe it's consequence. The secret that served them is starting to cost them. Whatever they gained, whether it was proximity, control, resources, the power of being the one who knows, is starting to yield diminishing returns. The advantage is eroding. And when the math of a secret shifts from keeping this benefits me to keeping this is becoming a liability, the calculus of loyalty changes. People who made pacts in comfort begin to wonder, in discomfort, whether the pact still serves them. And that wondering is a crack. Cracks spread. Maybe it's the simple, unstoppable force of alignment. The universe, if you believe in such things, has a way of bringing what belongs together into contact eventually, not because of magic, but because of physics. Because truth has weight. Because the people and information and connections that belong in your life exert a kind of gravitational pull on each other. And sustained separation requires sustained force. And that force eventually becomes unsustainable. Things find their way. They always do. Whatever the specific mechanism, and for you it may be clearly one of these, or some particular combination of all three, the movement is real and it is happening now. The walls are not coming down all at once, but they are coming down. And when they do, what has been kept from you will arrive not like a flood, but like light, revealing every contour of the space it has been forbidden to enter, making visible what has always been there, simply hidden. Movement 6. the person who was reaching for you. I want to return to them for a moment. Not to upset you, not to deepen any wound, but because understanding what this person went through is going to shift something in how you receive what's coming. And what's coming, for many of you reading this, involves this person finally finding their way through. Think about what it took for them to try. Whatever they were reaching toward you with, a feeling, an opportunity, a piece of information, a version of themselves that they'd built up the courage to show, it cost them something to move with it. People do not expose themselves willingly without real reason. The person who fought to reach you did not fight because it was easy or convenient or without risk. They fought because something in them recognized your value, because something in them said, "This person matters. This matters." And they moved on that recognition even when it was uncomfortable, even when the obstacles mounted, even when silence started to look like rejection. Each time they were turned back, and they were turned back more than once, in more than one form, they had to make a decision about whether to keep going. Some of those times, they kept going. They found another angle, another approach, another way to try to get the message through. Other times, they retreated and regrouped, sat with the sting of what felt like your disinterest, wondered if they had misread everything, wondered if they were embarrassing themselves, wondered if they should just let it go and move forward without this. And here's the part that matters. They're still here. Whatever form they exist in your life now, whether they are close or distant, whether you've been out of contact or in casual contact without real connection, whether there's someone from your recent past or your far past or your present, the thread is not severed. Threads don't sever just because they've been pulled taut. They stretch, and the tension in a stretched thread doesn't indicate it's breaking. It indicates there's force on both ends, pulling toward each other. That force doesn't disappear. It waits. Right now, in this window of time, something has changed for them too. They've received their own signal. Maybe they've learned something about the truth of what was kept, about the way the wall was built without your knowledge or consent, and that knowledge has reframed every silence and every non-response they ever received from your direction. Maybe they've simply felt a shift in the energy. The way you can feel when the atmospheric pressure changes before a storm, when the air holds a particular quality that tells you something is about to move. Whatever has reached them, they are in motion again. In a different way this time. More direct, more certain, less willing to be intercepted. When they reach you, and they will reach you, the most important thing you can carry into that moment is this. The silence was never yours. The distance that existed between you was manufactured. Whatever story you told yourself about why this connection never fully formed, whatever explanation you constructed for the gap, it wasn't accurate because it was built on incomplete information. You were making sense of a picture from which key pieces had been removed. When the pieces come back, the picture changes. When the picture changes, you change with it. Movement 7. Your intuition was the real intelligence. Now I want to talk about you, specifically about something you developed in the period you didn't even fully realize was a period. The stretch of time while all of this was being kept from you. There is a particular kind of growth that happens in isolation, not in crisis, not in chaos, but in that specific, quiet, slightly confusing kind of isolation where you're surrounded by people and yet somehow still feel fundamentally alone in your understanding of what's happening around you. Where you can't quite name the source of your restlessness, where you feel like you're operating with slightly less information than everyone else in the room, without knowing why. That isolation, it was not accidental, and it was not your weakness. It was a condition that was carefully maintained. The noise around you, the busyness, the managed narratives, the carefully positioned distractions, it was not just circumstantial, it was functional. It kept you close enough to the people holding the secret to maintain their illusion of normalcy, while keeping you far enough from the truth to never quite land on it. The goal was not to punish you. The goal was to manage you, to keep you in a particular position relative to the information and relative to themselves. But in the space between what they said and what your gut felt, something remarkable happened. You got quiet in ways they didn't expect. You started listening differently. Not to what people were saying, you'd always been able to hear that, but to what they weren't saying. The pauses, the choices, the things people reached toward and then stepped back from. You started developing a sensitivity to the subtext of conversations that you hadn't had before, or hadn't needed before, because you'd always taken what was presented at face value. But you couldn't do that anymore. Something in your system had registered, even without full data, that face value could not be trusted. And so you went deeper. Your dreams, for some of you, became unusually vivid during this period. Not nightmares, just detailed, layered, strangely accurate dreams that left you with impressions you couldn't quite shake. A version of a person you hadn't seen clearly in waking life. A conversation that felt like it was showing you something you'd never directly witnessed. A feeling upon waking of having been somewhere real, of having received something real, that your conscious mind struggled to hold on to, but your body carried forward through the day. Your instincts sharpened. Your ability to read people sharpened. Your tolerance for deflection and misdirection dropped dramatically, which may have created friction in some of your relationships without you being able to explain exactly why. Because once your system is tuned to detect dishonesty, it detects dishonesty everywhere. And living alongside people who are actively being dishonest with you, while also being surrounded by a world that is occasionally careless with truth, becomes something your nervous system resists in ways you feel, but can't fully articulate. This is not a flaw. This is evolution. You were being educated by your circumstances in skills that the people keeping the secret never anticipated you developing. They were thinking about you as you were when the pact was made. They were not accounting for who you would become in the quiet. And who you became in the quiet is someone who is equipped not just to receive this truth when it arrives, but to handle it, to hold it, to understand it, to act on it from a place of clarity instead of reacting from a place of shock. They thought that isolation would keep you small. It made you precise. Movement 8. What happens when the truth lands? I want to walk you through this carefully, because they have imagined this moment, these two people who have been carrying this, and the version they've imagined is not the version that's actually going to happen. And knowing the difference matters. They've imagined you falling apart. They've imagined the kind of devastation that makes someone unsteady, reactive, vulnerable, the kind of reaction that would require them to step in, to explain, to manage. They're hoping, even if they don't have a fully conscious thought about it, that when this comes out, you will need them. That your distress will be something only they can comfort, something only they have the context to soothe. Because as long as you need them in the aftermath, they retain some version of control. They remain necessary. They remain positioned as people whose presence in your life serves you. Even now, even after everything. That is not what is going to happen. What is actually going to happen when the truth arrives and you finally have the full picture is a feeling you've probably never had before in this specific form. It's not rage, though some of that may move through. It's not devastation, though grief for the time and the possibilities and the choices made with incomplete information is real and valid and will have its moment. Before any of that, and underneath all of it, there is going to be a profound, almost crystalline sense of clarity. Everything is going to make sense. That is the first thing. The strange thing about finally understanding a thing you've been confused by for a long time is that the confusion doesn't disappear slowly, it disappears instantly. The way a room that's been dark for hours is not gradually less dark when you turn on the light. It's just suddenly, completely illuminated. And you're going to stand in that light, and you're going to look back through every conversation, every strange moment, every deflection and inconsistency and unexplained behavior, and you are going to see it. All of it at once, arranged in its actual pattern instead of the false pattern you'd been given. And that seeing is going to feel like power. Because here is what they fundamentally misunderstood about the situation. They thought hidden information gave them control over you. It gave them the ability to influence your decisions, to manage your reality, to position themselves advantageously relative to your life. And it did, for a time. But the moment that information is no longer hidden, the moment you know what they know, all of that advantage transfers completely to you. Not because you've won some contest, not because this is about victory, but because you are now operating with the full truth of your situation. And people who operate with full truth move differently. They see things clearly. They make choices that actually serve them. They stop wasting energy walking in circles around a wall they didn't know was there. You're going to stop walking in circles. You're going to start walking in direction. There will be things to process, of course. There will be the specific grief of looking at certain people you trusted and having to revise your understanding of who they are and what they were willing to do. That revision is not nothing. Losing an idealized version of someone you love, even if you're gaining a truer version, even if the truer version is ultimately more useful to you, that is a real loss, and it deserves real acknowledgement. Don't rush through it. Don't perform invulnerability when you don't feel it. The clarity and the grief can both be true at the same time. You can be devastated by what someone was willing to do to you and be standing more solidly than you've ever stood. Those are not contradictions. What is important is that you don't let the grief hand them back the power. You don't return to needing their comfort for wounds they created. You don't reshape your understanding of what happened so that it fits a version of them that still protects your image of them. You see clearly what was done, what it cost you, and what it reveals about the actual nature of those relationships. And then you decide, from that clear vantage point, what you want to do next. Movement 9. The liberation. Here is what I want you to understand about what's coming. This is not just an ending. It is not just the exposure of a secret or the unmasking of people who manipulated you, or the resolution of a tension you've been living inside of without fully understanding why. Those things are real, and they matter, and they are part of this. But they are not the whole of it. What is actually happening underneath the drama of secrets and betrayal and truth breaking open is that a version of your life that was built on incomplete and distorted information is dissolving. A structure that never should have been built, not because you made wrong choices, but because you made your choices from inside a reality that had been tampered with, is losing its hold. And the dissolution of that structure makes room for something that your actual, unconstrained self, the self that isn't managing around gaps and inconsistencies and the vague background hum of something not being quite right, can actually build. There is a version of you that exists on the other side of knowing this truth. Not a perfect version, not a version without wounds or questions or work to do, but a version that is operating on the correct information about their own life and their own circumstances and their own value and their own options. A version that knows, with complete clarity, what the landscape actually looks like. Not the landscape as it was carefully constructed for their benefit by people with competing interests, but the actual, full, complex, honest terrain. That version of you makes very different choices. That version of you has access to things, people, opportunities, clarity about direction, that the current version is being kept from, not by circumstance or limitation or timing, but by the deliberate management of what you were allowed to know. Remove the management, and the access is there. It was always there. It has always been waiting on the other side of this. Think about the person who was reaching for you. When the wall comes down, when they can finally get the message through, you will understand that the connection you might have had, the opportunity you might have taken, the future that was trying to arrange itself is not gone. It retreated. It waited. It held a quality of patience that is almost hard to comprehend, because what waits for you doesn't know it's waiting. It simply exists, ready. And now, the obstacles between you and it are losing their structure. Think about the choices you would make differently with the full picture. The resources you would manage differently. The people you would look at differently. The moves you would make, toward and away from different things, if you were operating on truth. instead of a curated version of it. Those choices are becoming available to you, not in theory, in practice, in the real, material, daily reality of your life. And here is the final thing I want to say about the two people who made this pact, who sat in that private room and decided together that your ignorance served them, who have spent the time since managing and maintaining and occasionally reinforcing a lie. They are going to watch what happens to you on the other side of knowing. They are going to watch you become someone who cannot be managed with hidden information anymore. Not because you're suspicious of everyone, not because you become defensive or closed, but because you have been through the specific education of discovering that the floor you were standing on was not solid, and surviving it, and finding your actual footing, and moving from there. They are going to watch that, and they are going to understand, probably for the first time in this situation, that the pact they made did not protect their position. It simply delayed the moment at which they lost it. Because power built on someone else's ignorance is not real power. It is borrowed power. It is circumstantial power. The moment the person being kept in the dark turns on the light themselves, and you are turning it on, right now, in this moment, even before the final piece of information has landed, the foundation of that power begins to crumble. You do not have to do anything dramatic for this to happen. You do not have to confront anyone before you are ready. You do not have to make announcements, or stage a reckoning, or perform your knowing in front of people who are waiting to see how you react. You simply have to stand in what is real. You have to let the truth settle in you, acknowledge it fully without flinching from it, and make your choices from that clear, illuminated, fully informed place. That is the liberation, not the moment they are exposed. Not the confrontation, if one happens. Not the vindication, when it comes. The liberation is the moment when you are no longer living inside a reality that was constructed by someone else for someone else's benefit. The moment when your choices belong entirely to you, made with your own eyes fully open, in full possession of the facts of your own life. That moment is not coming. That moment is already here. Stand in it.